including heckling or shouting, will not be tolerated. Please turn off or silence all phones and electronic devices before the debate begins. Refrain from interrupting candidates while they speak. Allow them to finish before reacting. Applause is permitted at designated times, but should be kept brief. No shouting, booing, or other disruptive outbursts. Campaign signs, banners, or props are not allowed inside the the debate chamber. Recording or live streaming may only be permitted by media. Audience Q&A will be permitted if time allows. Questions must follow the moderator's guideline. No direct exchanges between audience members and candidates. Campaign materials may not be distributed inside the debate venue as well. The moderator organizers have the authority to enforce these rules and remove disruptive individuals if necessary. We appreciate your cooperation in making this an informative and respectful debate for all. Thank you for being here, for your civic engagement, and your commitment to our community. Let's have a great discussion. I would now like to welcome Carrie Lynn Hubert, Executive Director from the Social Development Council, SDGCA.
Lower this a little bit. Sego, bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Carrie-Lynn Hébert. Je suis directrice générale pour le Conseil de développement social pour Cornwall, SDG et Akwesasne. Pour assurer un débat respectueux, équitable et engageant, nous demandons à tous les participants de respecter les règles suivantes. Tout d'abord, nous demandons à chacun de rester courtois et respectueux envers les candidats, le modérateur et les autres participants. Le comportement dérangeant, tels que le chahut et les cris, ne seront pas acceptés. Assurez-vous que vos téléphones cellulaires et appareils électroniques sont éteints ou en mode silencieux avant le début du débat. Laissez les candidats s'exprimer sans interruption. Il est important de laisser terminer avant de réagir. L'applaudissement est permis à certains moments désignés, mais nous vous demandons de garder ça bref. Les cris, les huées et toute autre réaction perturbatrice ne seront pas permis. Les pancartes, bannières et tout autre accessoire de campagne ne sont pas permis à l'intérieur de la salle du débat, ainsi que la distribution de matériel de campagne. L'enregistrement ou la diffusion en direct du débat ne sont pas autorisés, seulement nos médias accrédités. Si vous avez des questions à ce sujet, veuillez vérifier avec les organisateurs. Pour une période de questions, doivent respecter les directives du modérateur, les échanges directs entre le membre du public et les Real Estate Board and Ontario
to the 2025 Provincial All Candidates Debate for the riding of Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry. I'm your moderator, Nick Seabrook. Thank you everyone for joining us here tonight in the Cornwall Civic Complex and for everyone watching at home. This event is brought to you by the Cornwall and Area Chamber of Commerce and the Social Development Council, SDGCA. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee peoples, the Mohawks of Akwesasne, who have been the original stewards of this land. As many of the descendants here are colonizers, we are grateful for the opportunity to gather here and we extend our gratitude to all generations who have cared for this land over thousands of years. This acknowledgement is a starting point in our commitment to dismantling ongoing oppression and inequalities while recognizing the invaluable contributions, past, present, and future, of Indigenous peoples. We continue to use this land acknowledgement as a call to action for ourselves and those around us to engage with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. I would also like to again thank the sponsors of tonight's event, the Cornwall and Area Real Estate Board and the Ontario Real Estate Association. Now to go over the format of tonight's debate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening statements. The order of opening statements has been drawn half an hour ahead of this debate. The order of statements will be first, representing the Ontario NDP, Jeremy Rose. Representing the Ontario Liberal Party, Devin Monkhouse. And representing the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, Nolan Quinn. This riding's candidate for the Ontario Green Party, Nicholas Lapierre, was unable to make it to this event this evening due to unforeseen circumstances. As with all candidates, he has a booth set up out in the hall if anyone's curious about any more information about the Green Party platform. For questions, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to answer each question asked by the moderator. The first question will be in the order of the opening statements. At the end of the candidate's answers to each specific question, the moderator will allow each candidate to respond for up to a minute. That'll be on a first come, first served basis. Candidates will raise their hand. The first one I see will be the first one I go to, and that person will be given a minute to rebut. I'll be keeping time, and I will possibly be asking a few follow-up questions of our candidates. I'll also be deciding when we move on to the next question. Questions have been solicited from a variety of sources tonight, not limited to myself, the moderator, the Cornwall Area Chamber of Commerce, the Social Development Council of SDGCA, the Cornwall and Area Real Estate Board, and a portion of the debate will be allowed for questions from the audience in person. Just a reminder on audience questions, get up to the mic, first come, first served. Please be respectful, be brief in your question, ask your question, and then sit down. It's not to have a back and forth engagement with any one candidate up on stage. To keep time, we have a timekeeper who will be holding up a green cue card to start time. A yellow cue card will be shown when a candidate has 15 seconds left, and a red cue card will indicate the end of time. Once that red cue card is shown, the candidate will have a few moments to wrap up their thoughts, and then the mic will be cut. As earlier stated, no photographs or videos other than your TV and media partners are allowed in the venue tonight. All right, now getting started to our first question. This election was called by Doug Ford. He said in response to the tariff issue presented by the United States, we're going to start on tariffs. With ongoing trade tensions and the potential for new U.S. trade tariffs, businesses are concerned about export barriers and supply chain disruptions. How will your party protect local businesses from the negative impacts of U.S. tariffs and strengthen trade relations to ensure market stability? I went right to questions. I skipped opening statements. My apologies. We're going to go to opening statements now. And we'll go to Jeremy Rose of the Ontario NDP first. My apologies.
Thank you, Nick. And well, Les, I'm not the only one experiencing jitters here tonight. I suppose if you're going to do it for the first time, why not do it in front of cameras and a live studio audience? Well, hi everyone. My name is Jeremy Rose. I'm 42, and I'm here to bring you the voice of the NDP. I am a brand new face to politics. This is my first time tonight, and I am inspired to run. I am inspired to run because I believe that it is time for change in Ontario, and I want you to consider me and Team Merit Styles the way to build a better tomorrow together. So tonight we're going to get a lot of opportunities to speak. We're going to answer a lot of your questions. I'm looking forward to meeting with all of you. And of course, please, as I do my best to try to get this message out, just because I'm new, understand that I care and that I really want to
15 seconds.
address important issues for people that the things that matter here in the Stormont, Dundas, and South Glengarry riding. These are the things that we're hearing from our national party team. So when we speak to healthcare, when we speak to education,
Time.
These are the things we need.
Devin Monkhouse of the Ontario Liberal Party.
Bonjour, Shago. My name is Devin Monkhouse, and I'm here representing Bonnie Crombie in the Ontario Liberal Party. I'm not from Cornwall. I can't say I'm a son of Cornwall, but I am from Eastern Ontario. I grew up outside Ottawa in the Ottawa Valley, and Eastern Ontario has a home in my heart. This is a place that we are often. I entered politics 25 years ago. I've been campaigning for the Liberal Party that whole time. I encountered people in university who wanted to change this country, who didn't believe the same things I believed about our laws and our government and how they should be interpreted. And they had the support and the freedom to
15.
push that 24/7, 365. So I'm here to do what I can to support what I believe in and to support the fact that I know even the status quo takes a struggle to maintain,
Time.
and that is unacceptable. So I'm here to be the voice of the Ontario Liberal Party, and I look forward to a spirited discussion.
Nolan Quinn of the Progressive Conservatives.
Thank you, Nick. So I'm Nolan Quinn. I've been the MPP for the last almost 3 years. Prior to that, I run the Dairy Queen in Cornwall. Taking after my parents' footsteps, I try to give back to my community where I can, whether it's through the restaurant or through my time. It's been an honor of a life to be able to serve this beautiful region at Queen's Park. You know, since I was young, heard time and time again that we need to remind Toronto that Ontario does go right to the Quebec border and past Kingston. And I've been a voice at the table, both at the caucus table and at the cabinet table. And if I'm honored enough to be reelected again, I'm going to be that strong voice that this region needs, because we're on the cusp of some really great growth. And you know, part of my experience jumping into politics was driven by the fact that I was on a couple different boards.
15.
of directors. I see Juliet here from the United Way, Children's Treatment Center, as well as a couple different corporate boards. So I'm very, very honored to be here today and looking forward to the debate.
Thank you, candidates. And of course, spoilers, we're now going to go to questions. I think you all have an idea of what I'm going to be asking first. So back to that tariff question. How will your party protect local businesses from negative impacts of U.S. tariffs and strengthen trade relations to ensure market stability? Jeremy Rose.
Thank you, Nick. So, well, when we speak to tariffs and the concern, I understand the anxiety, and when you have what you assumed was a good relationship with a friend and suddenly realize that that relationship is no longer what it once was. But there are ways that we can do things better. Instead of looking north and south, why don't we look east and west and focus on interprovincial trade and taking down those barriers, since we are on the eastern border with Quebec, since we can look across basically with our portion of the 401 and the strength that we have in our new logistics centers. These are things that we can do here in our riding, and then across through Ontario with the Merit Styles team, we're going to focus on trade, bringing back these staycation credits so that people can come to Eastern Ontario and visit all the wonderful tourism opportunities that we have here, and to invest in public works projects to keep people working.
Thank you very much. Devin Monkhouse.
Time and time again, we've seen Doug Ford and the Ontario PCs fumble their relationships and their attempts at negotiating with Trump. We saw Doug Ford celebrate Trump's re-election when a key plank in that year-long election was tariffs. This should not have been a surprise to anybody. The Ontario Liberal Party would stand resolute with our workers, with our families, and with our farmers, and we would make them whole. And our plan is to give them resilience and back them up. We have a good example from how we handled the COVID pandemic from the federal government. We have ways and we now have experience supporting people until these unjust tariffs are over, until we weather the storm. I think we cannot trust the Ontario PCs to handle Trump and to handle the Americans.
15.
The tariffs are going to happen, and we saw Trump turned away at the, we saw Doug Ford turned away at the White House. We've seen conservatives from across this country turned away by the Americans. They will not negotiate at a provincial level, and that's
Time.
not something we can trust Doug Ford with.
Thank you. And Nolan.
Absolutely. So, you know, Bonnie Crombie has made it very clear that she doesn't believe Ontario is large enough to be able to negotiate with the U.S. So Doug Ford has been very clear since day one. He wants to have Fortress AmCan to be able to play into Donald Trump's his thoughts that, you know, North America needs to be stronger and we need to ensure that we're protecting our own. You know, through diplomatic relations, you know, all of the premiers were down there and Doug Ford was leading, and he actually did have a meeting at the White House. You know, the Premier's been very, very clear since day one this started. There's 17 states that their number one customer is Ontario. There's another 11 states that their number two customer is Ontario. So that's 28 states out of 50 that their number one and number two customer for selling their products is Ontario.
15 seconds.
Ontario does have a very equal two-way trade relationship with the U.S. So we will continue with diplomatic relations, but if it gets tough, we will push where we need to.
Thank you very much. And now we will go to rebuttal. Who would like to have 1 more minute to rebut anything that was said on stage currently?
As a point of rebuttal, perhaps a bit of a frustration to see this election called so early when the province is at threat because of the actions of Trump. And perhaps why would we think that Doug Ford would be able to handle Donald Trump by spending $85,000 a month on a lobbyist or going directly to the White House to appeal, when we know that we have to stand strong for our own people?
We want a mandate from the people. Donald Trump is going to be here for 4 years. These tariff threats are not going to be 6 months. They're not going to be 3 months. We've already seen him backtrack on 25% and then added onto steel and aluminum. We're going to have 4 years of chaos with Donald Trump, and that's why we need a mandate from the people that lines up with Donald Trump's 4 years as well. Coming into this, we may need to invest heavily into infrastructure, as we already have with $200 billion. The Premier stated we will invest another $40 billion if the tariffs come forward to ensure that we're protecting Ontario's economy and the good jobs that are here as well.
And Devin Monkhouse, would you like to close us out on this topic?
The PCs are confident or they're not. And right now I'm hearing both things from this gentleman to my left, and I just don't buy it. I don't buy it's the reason for the election, and he has a strong majority, and if my colleague, the Conservative Party, is so confident, if Douglas Ford is so confident, there'd be no need for this election.
I am
So you
absolutely
can't have-
very confident in my
I'm
leader.
sorry, are we breaking the rules of the debate so early?
Devin, I'd like for you to
What?
say you have the same confidence in Bonnie Crombie, because I've seen a lot of your
Nolan,
tweets and you
Nolan,
didn't
you
support
had
your
a
leader.
chance to rebut. We're going to move on to the next topic. All right, our next topic is on housing and homelessness. Most regions in Ontario are facing significant challenges with affordable housing and rising homelessness rates. What comprehensive strategies will your party implement to increase affordable housing availability and address homelessness effectively across the province, while also ensuring the respect and rights of homeless people are upheld? Jeremy.
Well, thank you, Dick. Pardon me for 1 second. I'm a pen and paper kind of guy, and this is a really important topic that I want to make sure that I take the time to hit all the notes to know so that you know what the NDP is going to do. The program is called Homes Ontario, and the plan is 60,000 new homes and urgently built, tied and put together in a system where mental health and addiction support are part of the program. And we need to understand, even though in Eastern Ontario it's a fairly rural area, that this crisis is a percentage of the population. It is not an urban problem. Rural homelessness is skyrocketing in high percentages, and that is something that needs to be addressed, because when people need to find encampments, they come into the municipal cities to do
15.
what they need to do. So by uploading the costs to give this municipality support, with the provincial government coming to the table, we can help make a difference.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin.
The Ontario Liberal Party and our leader, Bonnie Crombie, are promising to double the amount of supportive housing in this province. We are looking to double ODSP payments from $13.68, which is an unsustainable amount of money to live on. People on disability need to be able to, in order to be productive and to just have dignity, they need to be able to have enough that they can afford a house. We're going to work towards a holistic approach in terms of solving homelessness by removing barriers to housing, by increasing funding to mental health, by fixing the healthcare system, by, again, doubling supportive housing. Through all of these efforts, we will work to reduce homelessness in this province.
15.
Homelessness, which now Ontario under Doug Ford has become home to half of all homeless in Canada.
All right, thank you very much, Devin. Nolan.
Thank you, Nick. You know, last year we increased our homelessness prevention fund by over $202 million, which was a 40% increase into the prevention fund, which is now $700 million annually that we are spending on homelessness prevention. On top of that, we also signed new deals with the City of Toronto and the City of Ottawa, which added an extra $600 million of homelessness prevention for Toronto, and another $120 million of homelessness prevention for the City of Ottawa. You combine that all together, currently we're spending $1.14 billion on homelessness prevention in Ontario currently right now. Understanding that there is more needed to be done, you know, and Devin had mentioned ODSP. The two of the largest increases to ODSP were back-to-back, and it was under the PC government.
15.
Since 2022, we've increased ODSP by 17%.
Thank you. And Jeremy, you'd like to rebut?
We hear really big numbers when we talk about what we're going to be doing about this housing crisis, but the number that is far too large is 80,000. With over 80,000 people now identified as homeless, no matter what the number is, billion or not, it is simply not enough. And when it comes to programs and what was going to be put in place, we can't help but ignore the fact that federal support that was coming to the province to help was rejected and not put in place to help us solve this crisis.
Devin.
No, but I just forgot to mention one thing. Just to add, the Ontario Liberal Party and its platform has what we call a REST program, which would be a kind of rent bank for those who are vulnerable people who are facing eviction or financial difficulties. They would then be able to apply for some financial assistance to help them through that period, and that would help prevent people going on to the streets.
All right, thank you. Nolan.
So Homes Ontario, you know, that's the NDP solution, is to add another layer of bureaucracy to building homes in Ontario. You know, we trust our service delivery managers. I see one in the back of the room right now. We've invested into McConnell and 9th Street, the tower that's there. Pitt Street North has another development coming, as well as Morris Glen out in Morrisburg. Adding another layer of bureaucracy and adding more red tape to building homes is not the way to do it, the way the NDP are pushing. It's actually going to slow down the process. We already have a system in place with our service delivery partners, and they are doing a fine job.
Thank you very much. Now, I was graciously reminded that we had agreed that when questions are asked, it'll be alternating who it gets to answer first. So Jeremy answered first. This next question, Devin will answer first. The question after, Nolan will answer first, and then the circuit will restart. I do have a follow-up question on this issue of housing and homelessness. In December, the provincial government passed Bill 242, which was aimed at clearing public spaces from homelessness encampments. My question is, what are your views on this legislation? If you think it was necessary, why? If you oppose it, why not? And how would you balance that issue of public spaces and the issue of homelessness and the rights of the homeless? And we'll be starting with Devin on this one.
There is no need to make homelessness illegal. We need a more caring and compassionate society. There are other ways we could have handled this that wasn't done in this way. It was very ham-fisted, and I think that we need to give each other grace, and certainly we can treat each other with more compassion than this.
All right, thank you. Nolan.
Just to clarify, that wasn't passed. They passed first reading. It's not legislation in Ontario. It actually dropped with the writ. But we've heard from a lot of our municipal partners, including in the City of Toronto and the City of Ottawa and the GTA area, that a lot of the parks are now open drug use, and there's unfortunate safety issues that are happening in our parks. And it's something that I see on my weekly journeys to Toronto. There is a challenge with the parks right now, and a lot of our municipal partners have asked for legislation to be able to ensure that our parks are used for the children, that children are able to use the parks the way they were intended to.
Thank you. Jeremy.
So regardless to intention, when a bill gets defeated simply because the government said it had to have an election again, it's there. It's to see what the intention was to be, and that is to criminalize homelessness. And that is simply just not okay, and it is against what the NDP holds as values. And what we've argued as bureaucracy with Homes Ontario is, in fact, creating a system that's an alternative to jail, to be focused, to when we finally get healthcare back on track and we find the doctors and nurses that we need, that they're going to be able to assist with mental health and addiction crisis, things that are occurring in real time, so we can get these people back to where they need to be.
Thank you very much. And we'll now open the floor to rebuttal. Devin?
My conservative friend talks about drug use in parks, yet his government is cutting safe injection sites. If there are no safe injection sites, everywhere is an injection site. And the best way of combating these sorts of things happening in public places is to help people get off the drugs and help people have a safe place to do it. And that's what these safe injection sites are for.
So it sounds like the Liberal candidates listened to our heart hubs: homelessness and addiction recovery treatment. These CTS sites are not recovery, they're not treatment. They are basically just allowing the problem to be pushed into a corner, and we do nothing about it. We need to treat people, and we need to ensure that they are recovered and they're able to live a fulsome life. We are going to continue pushing the hard hubs. There's 19 of them coming to Ontario. We're investing almost $400 million because recovery is the solution, not giving free illicit drugs.
Jeremy, would you like to weigh in on that before we move on?
Basically, I sit here frustrated. I sit here frustrated with the promise being made now. You've had 7 years. This crisis has continued to grow, and nothing has been done. Whatever we have seen as initiatives have been half-hearted.
This crisis has grown significantly because the coalition in Ottawa, and your party is connected.
Not Ottawa.
Provincial and Ottawa.
We're talking Queen's Park
You have the
tonight.
same constitution, federally and provincially.
We didn't interrupt you.
Are we following the rules of the debate, or are we not?
Understand what the coalition has done to the...
Nolan.
I see my conservative friend as just the amount of respect for the rules and the laws as Premier does.
Jeremy, would you like to conclude your thought?
I believe I've made my point. I'm quite
All
okay
right,
with
thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to economic growth and job creation. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, yet many struggle with rising costs, labor shortages, and access to funding. What specific policies will your party implement to support small and medium-sized businesses, promote job creation, and ensure a thriving local economy? And we're going to start with Nolan.
Absolutely. So, being a small business owner myself and, working through the pandemic, running the business, there were challenges. There were challenges with the supply chain. There were challenges with staffing. There were challenges with just getting my bills paid in that regard. But, those challenges created some opportunities to be able to rejig our businesses and possibly to retrain and retool some of our employees. Part of the skills development fund that we've had in Ontario, we've had multiple rounds of the skills development fund with over $600 million invested into the skills development fund. We've seen over 600 people retrained into new careers, into new career paths because of the challenges coming out of COVID. We recognize the importance of upskilling and retraining some people that have lost their jobs.
15.
But we do recognize that keeping taxes low, we haven't increased a tax since 2018, the first government that has done that. We are consistent with our taxes with both businesses and personal income taxes.
Thank you. And we'll go to Jeremy.
So when we talk about what we are seeing as a need for people who run small and medium businesses, I believe this becomes a conversation about qualified workers. And education and getting it back on track is going to be a key part of this conversation. And just learning in real time today that the one college that we have here in our riding is now going to need to rebrand as a learning center and no longer be considered a college. It's not college I went to. This cuts me deeply and it can help make me a mechanic, and that was an important part of my career. Healthy education helps business thrive. People being able to train, being able to be confident, to be able to get to the jobs, making it to work, these things are the things that we need to address in order to be able to help our small and medium businesses.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Jeremy. Devin, would you like to go next?
Doug Ford and the Ontario PCs are collecting the most taxes that any provincial government has ever collected. Doesn't matter, they're not lowering taxes, they're not raising taxes, but they are collecting the most amount of money a provincial government has ever collected. They are passing the largest budgets a provincial government in this province have ever passed. And are you seeing that? Is your life better? The Ontario Liberals are going to cut the small business tax from 3.2% to 1.6%. We're going to raise the qualification threshold for small businesses from $500,000 to $600,000. Those are real changes that will put money in the pockets of small business owners that will help you through the tariffs
15.
and help you reinvest in your business and your employees.
All right, thank you, and we'll go to rebuttal. Nolan.
Just 4 months ago, Bonnie Crombie was supportive of the carbon tax, so it's hard to be able to trust what the Liberals are saying. What you can trust since 2018, we haven't raised one tax. So there's been 7 years that we haven't seen one tax increase right across the province. Federally, we see tax increases every April 1st. They're consistently going up on different products that you're purchasing. We have held all of our taxes at the same rate. If anything, we've actually reduced the gas tax. The Premier has committed to continuing the gas tax reduction permanently, which is 10.7 cents a litre on top of removing your sticker for your license plate, freezing your license fees for
15.
a new license or a new license taken. That's going to save $66 million. We are committed to keeping taxes at the same level because with a healthy economy, the government bills will be paid.
Devin.
My Conservative friend seems to not understand that the Ontario Liberal Party and the Federal Liberal Party are different parties. We have different priorities. Our priorities are the people of Ontario. Our platform is the only platform that promises to cut taxes, and we also promise to cut individual income taxes under $75,000 by 22%. The Conservatives aren't offering that. They're wasting billions of dollars on boondoggles and on Doug's friends.
Nobody seemed to want to rebut me, but I wanted to take a quick moment just to put one more thing out for you there, just how important educators are. The damage being done to our local college right now, those qualified college educators, when we lose those, it will take years to recover. We're looking at K through 12 education where we have the problem now, and we want to fix these problems because tax cuts always come out when we're trying to buy votes. Investing in education is the long game to fixing this problem. And that NDP government is on that. That is part of our plan.
Now, I want to ask a follow-up related to education. I'm going there. So, education, we've seen, like Jeremy had mentioned, our colleges and universities, they're cutting programs. There's a tuition freeze on domestic students, international students, a similar freeze. How would you support post-secondary education in the province? And we started with Nolan last time. Jeremy, do you want to add briefly to what you just said?
Oh, yes, thank you very much. So basically, one of the things we have to recognize, of course, is we wanted to get away from the mix of the federal and provincial. I can actually understand why it happens because it gets this kind of conversation complicated. When the federal government cut the ability for international students to be able to come to our schools, it came as an awful blow. But the only reason that as good a schooling system as we know we had a good education system. The only reason that it was weakened was years and years of red and blue cuts, forcing a dependency on foreign students, subsidizing those college programs and forcing those schools to be dependent on that money. And when it disappeared, what used to be an incredibly good system
15.
was brought to its knees. There's no reason for us to have conversations about bankruptcy, losing status, and 40% course offering cuts when we know we need to invest more.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin.
What we're seeing today at the St. Lawrence College here in Cornwall is unacceptable. And what the progression, how we got there, certainly the red and the blue teams both have played a part in that. The funding for Ontario colleges and universities sits around 30%. As Bonnie said in the leaders' debate, we want to bring that up closer to 60% to bring ourselves in line with other provinces, with other territories. That is what's acceptable. That is what a government does. A lot of what has happened to the colleges and universities has been affected by the federal government, by the federal Liberal Party, and their actions on international students. The government needs to be able to step in and bridge the gap when those shocks come to our universities. That is the role of government. And we need to be able to preserve these skills and
15.
jobs in our communities. The Ontario Liberal Party will increase access to OSAP. We will increase the amount that you have to make before you have to start paying OSAP back to $50,000. We are going to work to increase funding for our schools and make it easier for our students to go.
Thank you. Nolan.
Thank you. So on an annual basis, we fund our colleges and universities at about $5 billion. That's not including the OSAP entitlements that are given out. So OSAP is not something that we pick and choose on the government level. It is an entitlement process. So if you're entitled to receive OSAP, you receive it. It's not a cut or a surplus in that regard. Last January, we increased the funding by $1.3 billion because we recognize the challenges that the federal government has created for our college and university sector. That was a historic investment on top of the $5 billion annually. The challenge with the sector right now is the college sector has unfortunately been declining domestically. Over the last 10 years, the numbers of our domestic students going to college have been decreasing, unfortunately. Hasn't been the same on the university level. So with the further cut that the federal government has done, we were supposed to receive a 10% cut. We received a 23% cut on Christmas Eve. And unfortunately, without the international students there, when some courses were 80% international students, it is hard to offer that course.
Rebuttal. Jeremy?
Thank you. So I suppose when we talk about these numbers, they're very big numbers. Sorry, you heard 1.3 billion, and I was working off of 900 million. And the truth is that this is what we call base funding. And again, it's just not enough to answer to the need. When we're talking bankruptcy, these are crisis conversations. And perhaps a little bit out of touch from the Conservative government because the students don't want to, they're not trying to not go to school. What really is important here is this is the cost of living. A kid can't afford to go to school. Now, we can't do much about tuition because absolutely we can burden our children no further with what they can contribute to how their education is going to be. We are going to have to support this next generation to get to the next level, and that's
15.
Better base funding where we do our share to make sure that they are going to get to the next level. A qualified, a skilled worker makes more money and makes Ontario stronger.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin.
This government spent $3.7 billion mailing us all a $200 check. And I think we'd rather our friends and neighbors had jobs instead of getting that $200 check. This government spent I'm done. I got applause for that.
Nolan would like to jump in.
Sounds like Devin's ready to go back to Toronto. Jeremy was just chatting about the affordability, and it is on our students. It's almost like he read our campaign promise in 2018. We cut our tuition by 10% in 2018 because we recognize there's an affordability crisis out there. We have frozen our tuition since 2018 because we recognize with students there is a barrier to going to school, and affordability is the #1 barrier. So keeping that tuition freeze in place is important because we're not going to put it on the backs of our students and the parents as well.
All right, thank you very much. I think everyone has had a chance to rebut. All right, we're going to go on to the next issue, which is poverty and basic income. Persistent poverty affects many Ontarians, with calls for innovative solutions like basic income gaining traction. How does your party plan to tackle poverty, and what is your stance on implementing a basic income program to support vulnerable populations? We'll start with Devin.
The previous Liberal government implemented a basic income pilot. I was supportive of that then. I was shocked and appalled when the Conservative government canceled it. They lost lawsuits when they canceled that program, wasting taxpayer dollars. I believe that we saw good results from that program. It was showing positive results. I would be in favor of a basic income or exploring a basic income.
Okay, Nolan.
I am not in favor of a universal basic income. We believe in giving people a hand up, not a handout. And that's why we have done some of the largest increases to ODSP twice in a row, 17% since 2022. We are the party that indexed ODSP to inflation. For 15 years, the NDP were propping up the Liberals in the minority government, and not once was ODSP a conversation. It was Doug Ford and the PC government that indexed ODSP to inflation, and it's gone up 17% in the last 2 years.
Thank you, Nolan. Jeremy.
Missing from my colleague's statements was the first part of the question where we were going to talk about the cost of living and how important that is and how that has resonated with everybody that I meet when I knock on doors. This is an important thing that we need to talk about, and whether or not we have plans to go further and to succeed in this. And the NDP does have a plan. We are planning to implement a grocery rebate. And that grocery rebate is going to be a direct benefit going right to the people that need it, the families that need to put food on the table. We all managed to mention ODSP because we're realizing just how much we need to invest in ODSP in order to support our most vulnerable people as they too grapple with the cost of living crisis. Now, with respect to basic income, absolutely. There was a promise from the Conservative government. I won't be able to get in 2 minutes to all the broken promises that over the last 7 years the Conservatives have made, but that was one of their first. It was a 6,000 person pilot project. All we had to do was finish the project to get the data so that we would know if basic income would be able to provide for our people.
All right, Devin.
A 17% increase in ODSP is under $15, right? Okay, just so we're clear, maybe 17. Sorry, I'm not great at math. But also a rebate. This rebate would have to be done after you purchased your groceries. You would then fill out paperwork and then send it back. So now we're asking poor people who are stressed already to do more paperwork to line the pockets of the Westons. I'm not really sure what this program does, how it would help, or why the NDP would propose something like that.
Nolan?
I forgot to also mention, we are also the government that increased the earned income threshold for people on ODSP. We increased it by 400%. It used to be $200 a month they were able to earn before that their ODSP got clawed back. We've increased it to $1,000 a month. We had some roundtables, and we recognized some people that were on ODSP were taken advantage of, and they were working cash jobs on the side because that $200 limit had not been increased in decades. So we increased that to $1,000 a month before they're able to have their ODSP income scaled back.
And before we go to commercial break, we'll go to Jeremy to close us off on this topic.
I do appreciate the chance to rebut because, of course, since I'm a new candidate, maybe I wasn't quite clear, and I'm more than happy to clarify what the grocery rebate is going to be. When I say direct benefit, what I'm trying to get at is there's no paperwork. This is tied to your tax return. This is something that's going to come to immediately. That's going to go straight to the families, no bureaucracy, no nonsense. But I'm really glad that you reminded me to bring up the cost of groceries when you mentioned Galen Weston, because there is another part of this program. I do want to share that with you. We are going to implement a watchdog system, and the plan here is to stop the gouging. If you want to raise the price, you have to declare it and put it on the price tag the same way you put on a sale. That way we can hold our grocery stores more accountable and make the price of groceries more fair.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you to all of our candidates. We're going to go to a very quick, and when I say quick, I mean really quick commercial break, 60 seconds. Please stay in your seats. We'll be right back. Hello, and thank you for staying with us through that break. Welcome back to the 2025 provincial election candidates debate for the riding of Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry. We're going to continue with our prepared questions now, going to the issue of infrastructure and regional development. Reliable infrastructure such as transportation, broadband internet, and commercial spaces are essential for growth. What investments will your government make in infrastructure to support business expansion, attract investors, and enhance regional economic development? And we'll go to Nolan first.
Absolutely, thank you. So, in the last few years, we've had a couple different funds, one of them being the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund, as well as the Building Faster Fund, which combined to about $3 billion to be able to get more homes online, to be able to build more homes faster, because we are in a housing shortage. We're trying to build 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. Locally, $27 million came to both North and South Stormont to be able to build thousands of homes just outside the city of Cornwall. We're also investing $4 billion into high-speed internet to wire every house in Ontario with high-speed internet, wired or satellite. We all recognize coming out of COVID the importance of high-speed internet. It is essential. I know at my house I had a wife that was teaching and 3 kids learning on the internet at the same time. It is an essential, just like drinking water is in Ontario.
Thank you, Nolan. Jeremy,
Sorry, did you go to
you're up next.
Oh, wonderful. All right, so when we're speaking about what we can do to help the infrastructure around here, we need to remember, of course, how agricultural the region of the Stormont, Dundas, and South Glengarry is. SDNG in total. In fact, it's awkward to try to say South Glengarry as well. But when we're focusing in, when we talk about supporting them, how about we remove the risk management cap, the ban on the risk management program, so that farmers can feel more secure as they have to go through this tariff, wander through this tariff system. The conversation about the 138 seems to have gone away. So when we're talking about Eastern problems, we haven't even had the conversation about things that we can do to make infrastructure around Ontario better. And also, when we start to think about things like Starlink, it puts into question whether or not we have been buying local,
15.
like we said we were going to do, when we are going to now commit to buying Ontario, buying local, and making it here. So these are the sorts of things that an NDP government can look at to make sure that it's an Eastern conversation and things that we can do to buy local and build better.
Time.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin.
The Ford government has really abandoned and forgotten its rural and small town communities. We need to invest more to be, especially with remote work, keep people in our communities, move people out into our communities, build robustness. You know, it's a good policy when it's at least on two parties' platforms. We're also talking about increasing the risk management for our farmers and increasing their resiliency in the face of climate change and the American tariffs. And wrapping back into the American tariffs and Doug Ford's handlings of Trump, right? He's flip-flopped again on Elon Musk's Starlink, where we can brag about spending all this money to bring, and my conservative friend talked about making sure everyone was wired in, but it's not wired in. We're spending
15.
I'm going to miss the exact number. We're spending millions of dollars on Starlink, and it's $60,000 a household to connect them to the internet. $60,000.
For rebuttal?
Absolutely. So, you know, I think it's interesting that they brought up the risk management program. So this last weekend, I was just at a sheep farm in Winchester. They had a tour that was there, as well as at the Sand Road Sugar Camp, and we were being complimented for doubling the risk management program to $200 million for our farming communities. So maybe you guys haven't got the memo yet, but we've already done that. When it comes to Starlink in the north, there is a challenge getting people wired in northern Ontario. And it's an equitable thing. Just because they live in the north doesn't mean they shouldn't have access to reliable, high-speed internet. I think the other piece that's missing is the partnership with the Indigenous community in the north. They are the ones that are going to be rolling out Starlink and ensuring that the service is equitable in the north. So that partnership
15.
with our Indigenous community is very valid, and it should be part of this conversation.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in? Devin.
I grew up outside of Ottawa. We used to be called Silicon Valley North. We had a very strong telecoms, very strong telecoms industry there, and we still have a very strong telecoms industry in Ottawa. It is inexcusable that this government is not working with provincial partners and provincial companies to find an alternative. This country was one of the first countries to put communication satellites in space, and here we are giving millions of dollars to American fascists instead.
Jeremy, do you have anything you want to jump in on?
So the Starlink issue, I think we're all talking about it. We're giving a lot of concern when we're talking about it. And the criticism here is what the NDP can do better, what its commitment is going to be. We can't look back as to when the Americans had turned on us and when we were tendering for the deals, but we can look forward and we commit. If Starlink isn't going to work because it has to be sacrificed in order for us to get Trump under control, the thing that we need to look towards is our Canadian teams. Absolutely, to the north, they do need access to internet, but that's something that we can do here, and it's something that we need in Eastern Ontario as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Our next topic, addiction and mental health. The demand for mental health services and addiction support has been increasing, emphasizing the need for enhanced resources. How will your party address the growing need for mental health and addiction services to ensure comprehensive and accessible care throughout Ontario? And we started with Nolan for that last question, so we'll be starting with Jeremy.
So when we have the conversation about mental health and about addiction, it is what our healthcare system needs to be built back up to be able to handle and to do. So when we talk about the 15,000 nurses, the 3,500 doctors bringing in, one of the roles, one of the things we need is to make sure that they exist in a public healthcare system. The two-tiered private healthcare system that is advocated by the other parties in this race is not going to be able to provide the addiction support and the health support that people need. People need to be able to go see their doctor with their health card, not their credit card.
All right, Devin.
I'm very happy to be in the middle, ping-ponging. A good centrist. the Liberal Party believes in increasing access to mental health. Our platform talks about, and as my Conservative friend likes to mention, where I live in Toronto, that we are going to bring mental health resources to our transit systems so that some of the first responses that we have for suicide or overdose or homelessness on GO Transit, on Metrolinx, on the TTC, on our transit systems is not police, is not transit constables, but is mental health. We need to have a more compassionate and a more caring society that can help people in need. And we need to be able to have access to that in
15.
every community across this province. And we're seeing this government failing in providing that.
Thank you, Devin. Nolan.
Thank you, Nick. One of the things that we did right when we formed government in 2018 was the Roadmap to Wellness. And we have invested $3.8 billion into the Roadmap to Wellness to ensure that we are updating and fixing a broken system when it comes to our mental health in Ontario. The other thing that, under Premier Ford's leadership, the first portfolio of a mental health and addictions minister in Ontario's history. We are ending the stigma on mental health, and we're having conversations around mental health and addictions every single day. One of the things locally that we have done, and it was actually one of my first announcements, and I was looking back at it yesterday, was the 6 safe beds that we announced at the Cornwall Community Hospital back in 2022. There's 400 of those beds across the province currently right
15.
now that have seen over 10,000 unique visits. We have 6 of those locally in Cornwall that are helping out people with mental health and addictions.
Thank you very much, Nolan. We're looking for rebuttals. Anyone want to jump in? Nolan, you have some more to say.
Yeah, I'll rebuttal myself. The other piece that I think is important, because I feel like you're too quick on the cards there, Ross, is we have MCERT, mental health professionals with our police force, both the Cornwall Police and the OPP, and we ensure that those are funded on the provincial level, and that has a mental health professional on shift with the police, de-escalating on scene.
Anybody else? Jeremy.
I think my frustration here is regardless of the numbers that have been given, the date 2018 is so long ago. And we know that there are shortages in our healthcare. We know there are shortages in education. And when we talk about mental health, we need to remember that this is like a K-12 through adult problem that we're dealing with. Cutting disability support to students, the type of things that we're going to support them through mental health is a problem that sets them up. We really need to make sure that we are taking care of our kids. We know these shortfalls still exist. We need the NDP's investment in education, proper funding, real numbers, not just big numbers, in order to make this problem
15.
better. When we address the crisis by actually finding a way to create the healthcare system that can support the people where we need, then we can start talking about where we put them and how we enact the change.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin, do you want to finish us off on this topic? It's good? All right. Moving on to business costs and taxation. Rising operational costs, including taxes, energy prices, and inflation, are major concerns for businesses. How does your party plan to balance the need for government revenue while keeping business costs competitive and fair for entrepreneurs? And I believe we're starting with Devin for this one. Yes, thank you.
Yep. You missed me a time ago. I think we've gone over this, or I've gone over my points about this before, and that we're looking to reduce costs for small businesses. We're the only party in this election that's talking about cutting taxes. We're going to reduce by half the small business tax from 3.2 to 1.6%, and we're going to raise the threshold to be a small business, which will affect over 60% of small businesses in this province, up to $600,000.
Thank you very much. And Nolan.
Absolutely. As I've already mentioned, Nick, we haven't raised a tax since 2018, and we're committed to that. There hasn't been one tax raise, so businesses have the continuity to know that their provincial taxes aren't being raised. Unfortunately, on the federal side, they've been raising them pretty significantly. The other thing that I've been working on since 2022, and I think it's the worst kept secret in Eastern Ontario, is the Great Wolf Lodge. It hasn't been 100% confirmed yet, but when I got elected, I was told, good luck getting any traction on that. And it wasn't neutral for the longest time. That is going to protect us from the tariffs and unfortunately, a recession that could come about from those. I was able to secure funding and support from the Ontario government to make sure that the Great Wolf Lodge does hopefully come to fruition. The City of Cornwall is still working on a few
15.
different pieces, but just speaking with my Great Wolf Lodge representatives just recently, they are feeling very comfortable, and it was because of the support that I got calling the Premier.
Thank you very much, Nolan. Jeremy.
I suppose when I think about this issue and how I'm going to view it, maybe my first frustration is to hear Great Wolf Lodge brought up only because it reminds me of Toronto politics and how we had to spend time talking about Ontario Place. These things are nice, but they are not addressing the issue at hand. When we're talking about the affordability for business, we're talking about large corporations, and the support that you need is because they're gouging you too. When we talk about costs, and so it's cost of supplies. So when the watchdog system's enabled, the things that are going to work for consumers are working for businesses as well. When there's more honesty and parity in the price tags that are going out, you're going to see a more level playing field that's going to support businesses and be able to help them.
Thank you, Jeremy. Rebuttal? Nolan?
Maybe I heard Jeremy wrong, but he sounds like he's against the Great Wolf Lodge. 600,000 unique visits are going to come to SD&G. 600,000 visits to Ontario from an 8-hour region, whether it's from the East Coast, from New Hampshire, from Vermont. Those are all new dollars coming to Ontario and SD&G. It's going to help every single small business, whether it's agritourism, restaurants, retail, hotels. It is going to put us back on the map.
Devin, you wanted to respond.
To agree somewhat with both, Great Wolf Lodge, great. Great Wolf Lodge, not a small business, not an entrepreneur. It'll help the community, but at what cost, right? They're going to drive past Cornwall. They're going to drive past our small towns, just like when the highways come through.
It'll
You
actually
drive
be
past.
on
They
the
go.
401. They can't
Nolan,
drive past.
you had your
without
chance to
seeing it.
rebut.
Okay,
You had your
okay,
chance to
great.
rebut.
They don't have to go into our communities.
All right, Jeremy, would you like to finish us off on this topic?
Finish us off on this topic, absolutely, because the thing is, it's not a question of whether the Great Wolf Lodge is going to be great. It's going to be great. It's a question of priorities. In this question, in this conversation, it's not a priority when we have other things that we have to deal with. So the frustration here is that I haven't heard from our government that it has its priorities straight, which is part of why I'm running for change.
All right, our next topic is healthcare workforce challenges. Ontario is facing a critical shortage of healthcare professionals, from personal support workers to physicians, mental health specialists, impacting the quality of care and access to services. What specific initiatives will your party undertake to address the shortage of healthcare professionals across the sector, and how do you plan to ensure the sustainability of these workforce solutions to meet the future healthcare needs of Ontarians? Nolan.
Only 2 minutes.
Only 2 minutes.
So we've done a lot on this file. So for 10 weeks, I was the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Health, and now I was the minister prior to the election at Minister of Colleges and Universities. We're opening up new med schools in Ontario. TMU is coming online this September. As well, we're opening up the York University Med School. That is going to be the first med school in Canada's history to focus on primary care physicians. We understand there's a shortage of primary care physicians. That's why the Ontario Learn and Stay grant that we announced about 3 months ago is specific to family physicians. This one will be 1,360 doctors that aren't going into a specialty, into surgeon. They're actually going to go to family physicians, and we're going to pay their tuition to ensure that they are committing to be a family physician in Ontario, just like what we did with Ontario Learn and Stay grant. Round one, it was about the rural areas, about paramedics, about PSWs, and about nurses, to ensure areas that, like Winchester, Alexandria, that struggle to retain and recruit healthcare professionals. If we help pay for some of their costs of tuition, they commit to a certain amount of time in that rural region. We are consistently breaking down barriers, whether it's international doctors, removing some of those barriers of accreditation. Just about a month and a half ago, Morrisburg signed on with a new doctor that's coming, that's an internationally trained doctor, that will go through a mentorship program. Winchester was supposed to receive another one of those doctors. Unfortunately, the applicant did not finish their application. Since 2018, we've had over 100,000 nurses registered to work in Ontario. Since 2018, we've had 15,000 doctors registered to work in Ontario. Since 2018, we've had 3,500 new hospital beds, with 20 of those being at the Cornwall Community Hospital.
Jeremy.
When we talk about healthcare, under the Wynne government, we heard a new term, and it was hallway medicine. And under the Conservatives, with 7 years, it has only gotten worse. We're talking now about the legacy of a government that is just trying now to turn the corner on something that it has left neglected for far too long. Regardless of how many they have said they have hired up to date, the NDP plan to hire 15,000 more nurses, 3,500 more doctors. And how did we get here? We got here because of the concerns of burnout, nurse-to-patient ratios that are way out of control. And let's not forget Bill 124, which cost $4 million of your dollars to try to litigate and force and bust the unions that support these workers and drove them out of the industry. The doctors that are coming, we do need to do everything we can to reduce the red tape for international doctors, to reduce our urgent doctor needs. We also need to make sure that when they get here, that it's not going to be a private-public sort of balance. We need to invest in a public healthcare system uniquely to provide services to people where they need them in public healthcare centers, so that when the doctors can get together and reduce all the huge amounts of paperwork they have to do. They have been saying that they need this, and that means that they can get back to what they want to do, which is helping patients.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin.
I was going to say 10 weeks. That's about twice as long as this election. We've seen this PC government. It was elected on ending hallway healthcare. Now 2,000 of your fellow Ontarians are serviced in break rooms and hallways every day. The Ontario Liberal Party promises to open 2 new medical schools on top of the ones that we've already done, work with the existing medical schools to increase their enrollment, give incentives for doctors to do their residency in rural and northern areas, and give them incentives to stay there when they're done. The Ontario Liberal Party is going to work to, and promises to, make sure everybody has a family doctor in the next 4 years. In the Cornwall area, in Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, 20,000 people don't have a family doctor. There's 1 walk-in clinic in this city. 1. That's a shame. It's embarrassing that in the richest province in this country, in my opinion, the greatest country in the world, we have people lining up at 8 a.m. That happens in my neighborhood, 6 a.m., sure. That happens in my neighborhood, that happens in your neighborhood, and we need to bring that to an end.
Rebuttal. Nolan.
So I heard Jeremy ask, how did we get here? I heard Devin say, this is a shame. The Bob Rae days, they cut residency seats. They didn't see our aging population. The Wynne government cut residency seats as well. We have thousands less doctors in our province now because of both the NDP and Liberal governments. Recognizing that our healthcare budget has increased $85 billion since 2018. That is a 30% increase since 2018. It's $25 billion extra on our healthcare budget annually. So when we recognize where we got here, it's the PC government that has been increasing residency seats, both for undergrad and postgrad. They saw the aging population and they did nothing about it. Same for our long-term care homes. It's a shame that there was nothing built in 15 years.
Devin.
It's a lot of finger pointing for a government that's had 7 years to fix hallway healthcare and hasn't.
I suppose once we were going to get too far into this debate, we were going to hear about Bob Rae again. Just a really important point is, of course, that Merritt Stiles is running to be your premier. It's a new leader and a new NDP. These are going to be times where we can make things better. This NDP is committed to healthcare. This is something where we intend to make sure that we bring change.
These next 3 questions are specifically related to housing and development. The first question, if elected, How do you ensure that more homes are built in our community? Jeremy.
Well, when we're asking the question about what the province can do, is basically about being able to support the municipalities that are trying to make these decisions. Urban density, it's difficult in Eastern Ontario because it's a Cornwall issue when we talk about making sure public transportation is well in place so that the more developed parts of the city can grow. Is staying away from initiatives like digging up the green belt or other kinds of things where if it's something that is important to us, we make sure that we don't put the houses where we don't need, and we make sure that we put the houses exactly where we are. So, of course, we've been talking about affordable housing so many times, and that's key, because when we talk about that, we're also talking about placement. When we talk about where we put these, that they are close to the support that people need, because the new homes we need right now are the affordable homes.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin?
Doug Ford and the Ontario PCs have a brewing scandal with their $8 billion Greenbelt boondoggle. Their land swaps, it's coming. They're afraid. That's why this election is happening. Building $1 million, 300,000 square foot McMansions in the GTA doesn't help anybody. I've been in real estate since 2011. I was a friend and family realtor. I worked on getting people I knew in my age bracket into their homes. And that price point went from $350,000 to $500,000 to $700,000 to $900,000. And now I help resale, but my people in my age bracket who missed out have missed out. The Ontario Liberal Party will remove development charges on new homes, and we're going to have to work with our regional municipal partners to make up that income, and we know that. But that can reduce the cost of a new home by $170,000. We're going to remove the for first-time homebuyers and for seniors, we promise to remove the land transfer tax. Now, I see my area friends in the back, and I know I don't like the land transfer tax as much as they do, but this is as much as we got is removing it from first-time homebuyers and on seniors, and we can go further. Right? We need to help people get into the market. We need to help people exit the market. And many of us are leveraged in a way that $10,000 to $30,000 is really going to make a difference for some people who may have been over-leveraged in 21 and 22. So we're working to help people build reasonable homes, reduce those prices, and the PCs have seen their housing starts drop to extremely low levels.
15 seconds.
This is really disappointing. As a real estate agent, for over a decade, I expect more from the PC government on this. And they have really let me down. And I think that the Ontario Liberal Party does and is listening to what we need to get builders building the houses we need.
Nolan.
Thank you. We will continue working with our municipal stakeholders and partners. Unfortunately, we've had a federal government that has walked away from a long-standing one-third infrastructure funding agreement. So the Housing Enabling Water Fund system, that was Ontario only because the federal government decided they weren't going to pony up the one-third of funds that they normally do. Normally it's one-third municipal, one-third provincial, one-third federal. We'll continue being there when our federal government is absent. We're going to continue working with our stakeholders to ensure that we have more infrastructure. We hear it time and time again that it comes down to water and wastewater, and that's what's holding back housing growth. So we'll continue investing into the water and wastewater, even when our federal government won't do it with us.
Devin, you wanted to rebut?
Sorry, I don't think Jeremy's spoken yet. I think I jumped in too quickly.
You did. Jeremy.
Sorry, is it a rebuttal?
It is on housing, on homes being built in the community.
I did answer that
You
question.
did
I hope you guys were with me.
Sorry, Devin.
I'm getting confused too. I was like, I want to rebut, but I didn't remember if you'd answered.
Devin, go ahead.
I don't mind, again, to remind my colleague, the federal and the Ontario Liberal parties are different, but when the progressive conservatives want to put infrastructure in the Greenbelt where development pressure and the municipalities do not predict development for 30 years, why would your partners show up to give you the money? If we're trying to open lands that are not going to be economically viable to put houses on for decades, and then we go ask our partners for money, do you expect them to take us seriously?
Would anyone else like to jump in on this issue? Nolan?
I would just like to touch upon, we do have a Ministry of Red Tape Reduction. In 2023, we had the most purpose-built rentals in Ontario's history at 14,000 new rental units come online in 2023. Continuing to remove that red tape makes it more viable for people to get into the landlord business and to build new properties. Because of the red tape reductions we've done, we've seen significant increases. We don't normally see more than a couple thousand rental units come online in any year. To see 13,000, over 13,000 in 1 year was significant, and it's because of the policies the PC government's putting forward.
Would you like to jump in, Jeremy?
Yeah, well, once I hear rentals, I'd love the opportunity to bring in an important issue that we would like to get to tonight. I'm sure someone was going to ask about it, and how the rental system is broken. It's not working the way that it's supposed to. We need to look at the complexity and the rules about rental protection and address it. We need to close the loopholes. We need to prevent rent eviction and the other kinds of abuses that are put on tenants as they're trying to find a way to put food on the table, wondering whether or not they're going to be able to live there or afford their rent is not something that we should have to worry about in Ontario.
Thank you, Jeremy. In Devin's initial response, he mentioned development charges, so I will go to that question next, and we'll be starting with Devin. Do you support municipal development charges? I think you answered that, but go into your answer a little bit further.
To muse on that, development charges are an important part of municipal income. Absolutely. You need to build the roads. You need to build the sewers. You need to build the wastewater takeaway sewer systems. But development charges have been ballooning. If you look at major cities, like Ottawa and Toronto, the development charges have jumped in the last few years. And they're being spent on community centers and other infrastructure, right? The development charge system is being abused by some municipalities in a way to keep property taxes low. And I understand that desire, but that is not the purpose of development charges. Development charges are there to hook up your house to the municipal systems. And they are becoming a barrier to building homes. And we need to remove or reduce red tape to build homes. And that's part of what this is. If we need to work with our municipal partners, there are reasonable uses for development charges, and it's becoming something that is abused.
Nolan.
Absolutely. So, in Cornwall, we are local. The municipal development charges are very small. In the GTA, there are a lot larger. There are other areas that are significantly expanding their development charges. In Cornwall, they're not as high as the GTA area. What we have done as a government, the PC government, is remove development charges on not-for-profit and affordable housing. So the Habitat for Humanity now is not paying municipal development charges because that is affordable housing and it's not for profit. There was some controversy with that with some of our municipal partners, but we do believe when it comes to affordable housing and not for profit, they should not be tacking on extra costs to developing that house.
And Jeremy.
So when we talk about something like municipal development charges that are not always universally used, we're talking about whether or not municipalities are having to get creative to try to close the gap on the shortfall. So when we are talking, it's great to see that it's been barred or blocked from being given to nonprofits and other social development programs. But how about investment? About of the taxes that we pay, about 10% go to the municipalities, but another 90% go to the rest of the federal and the provincial government programs or coffers that need to be invested back in our communities. So it's really a question about whether or not the province is going to come in to pay its share and make sure that the infrastructure gets put in place where it needs to be so that we can build the houses where they need to go.
Rebuttal. Anybody want to jump in? Nolan.
So as I mentioned earlier, recognizing that the federal government has walked away from the one-third, 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 our Housing Enabling Water Fund, we are investing into that on the province because we do recognize that there are challenges on the municipal level, and some of these infrastructure projects are significant for smaller communities, and that's why the province has stepped up with over $3 billion on the Building Faster Fund and the Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund to ensure that our municipalities are able to have the growth that we know they need for the economy as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, we'll move on to our last question on this topic. Do you support ending exclusionary zoning and allowing 4 units as of right? And we'll start with Nolan.
So I believe that's a municipal decision. So each different township or city does have different requirements or different variations as to whether that works in that community or not. In downtown Toronto, if you're going to put 4 units on some of the very tight streets, there is some challenging with parking on that. So I do believe that is something that's best on the municipal level because they truly understand their municipal communities that they're representing.
Thank you, Nolan. Jeremy.
So when we're talking about this 4 units thing, it would seem a little foreign to me because I think out here in Eastern Ontario, this sounds more like a Toronto issue. Cornwall maybe is definitely, doing its part. It does have the ability to zone and create the types of density that we need. But one of the things maybe when we're talking maybe into the SDSG is the idea that, yes, we need to make sure that we are talking about multi-unit homes being built in the smaller communities, because when we're talking about a worker shortage, being close to business, green is good. So when those workers, those qualified workers have the chance to actually be able to reduce their cost of living by being close to work, if it's what it takes for there to be a multi-unit building to be put in place, this government, the NDP government, would make sure they work with the municipalities that was realized as a reality.
Thank you. And Devin.
As much as it absolutely pains me, I have to agree with my Conservative colleague. This is a municipal issue. If your municipality wants this, then go for it. And while it sounds like it's a Toronto thing, I promise you in my neighborhood in Scarborough, there's plenty of people who think that they live in Cornwall and that they've got a lovely rural property that they don't want a 4-unit house next to. And we have those battles in Toronto. And I think that is a municipal battle. That is a discussion that neighbors need to have with each other. And again, I just have to say that I would agree that it is a municipal issue. I'm not sure if we would say 4 as a right everywhere. I think I agree that you need to have a discussion locally. We can't make that decision for all of Ontario.
All right, thank you. Anyone want to? Nolan, go ahead.
Well, thank you for agreeing with me. I appreciate that. Maybe we can go for a coffee in Toronto. But what we have done is allowed granny suites or garden suites to be able, and it's definitely in the Toronto area, so in the backyard, they're allowing those little tiny homes to be built in, called garden suites or granny suites. We do believe that that is achievable, and it doesn't change the makeup of a community or a neighborhood in that regard.
Devin?
Is that called a bunkie? That's what we call it out here?
All right. Anybody else?
Well, it's interesting that, yes, if Toronto's just doing it, Cornwall's already done it. The house behind the house is a long-standing tradition here. As a mailman, I deliver to them every day. So if that's what it takes, well, then great. I think we're already ahead of the curve.
All right. Thank you very much. We have one more question before our second commercial break, and it's about the state of our democracy in Ontario. During the 2022 provincial election, 57% of eligible voters did not vote for any party. They stayed home. The party that formed the majority government did so with less than 1 in 5 support from voters. Is our democracy in crisis? Is there a need for electoral reform? We will start with Jeremy.
Democracy and crisis. We're using those words together, but truly I don't believe it's a crisis. Perhaps, it's a fight back against cynicism. Perhaps a snap election in February wasn't the best idea when it comes to trying to encourage people to vote more, because we all spoke on our Facebook pages. Devin, I'm not sure, I don't mean to, Nolan and I were doing local Facebook stuff and talked about how important voting was. And this is why I'm here. Truly, less than 42% of people eligible to vote in this riding took that opportunity. I want them to feel inspired. I don't want to talk crisis, and I don't want to talk criticism, because we are in charge and able to make good change. All I need to do is inspire you. Voting is quick, voting is easy. And if you take that opportunity, I promise you things will change for the better.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin?
I'm going to go off platform here, I think, a little bit, so don't hold the Liberal Party to what I'm about to say, but you can certainly hold me to it. I don't think we're in a crisis. I think Doug Ford and the progressive conservatives play the game that is parliamentary democracy. I'm not a fan of set 4-year election cycles. I like the fight. I like the play. I like the ability to make a government fall when it needs to fall. Setting up 4-year cycles doesn't feel Canadian to me. And, you know, as much as I can say, you know, I don't like a February election, it's when the election happened. They had the power to do it, and they did it. That's their prerogative. That people don't vote or that the progressive conservatives take advantage of that is frustrating. Do we need to go with an Australian system of forcing people to vote? I don't think so. But to my NDP colleague's point, it shows the cynicism that people have. Tonight, there's been talk of federal and provincial. The NDP is a fundamentally differently structured party than our two parties. And our two parties are differently structured than the federal parties. It's an extremely common experience at the doors to have people confused about what we're talking about, what level of government we deal with. There's a civics issue, there's a knowledge issue. And we should be proud of our democracy. And I'm here in Cornwall today, in Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry, because I believe in this democracy.
50.
Because I believe that I need to be here to hold a minister's feet to the fire, that there should be a Liberal candidate here. And I'm not pretending to be from Cornwall, and I'm not saying I'm from Cornwall, and I'm not pretending to be your neighbor. I would have the privilege, if elected, to be that.
Time.
But I'm not, and I'm not saying I am.
Nolan.
I think Devin said it all, but no, I don't think it's in crisis. I do believe people are apathetic towards democracy right now. Unfortunately, when they turn on the TV, you know, and I've been part of question period, but you turn it on, whether it's federally or provincially, and you see a lot of dramatics going on, but we all work together behind the scenes. The one thing I do want to touch upon is, you know, during my first term, I visited a lot of elementary schools, including my own children in Ingleside. And the questions that were coming out of the youth to understand the process more is encouraging. I do believe we have some work to do on civics, and I see some city councilors in the room, and I'm sure you can appreciate sometimes people will come with a frustrating thing, and it's federal or provincial, and you know, we deal with that. I see some of my office here as well, and you know, they deal with some things that are federal, and it's a federal issue, not a provincial issue. So there is an education awareness piece to it, but I don't believe it's in crisis. I was disappointed last time that we did have a low turnout. I thought coming out of a pandemic, people were frustrated and angry and very vocal. We would have seen a higher turnout. Unfortunately, they seem to be more vocal online than at the box, the voting box.
Thank you, Nolan. Does anyone have anything else they would like to jump in on this issue? Jeremy.
Thank you, Nick. So yeah, I believe, well, when we talk about the 4-year cycle, we are used to it. And I think that when I'm thinking back to the people that I've talked to at the door, that we were kind of in a federal cycle for this conversation. And people were shocked to end up going to the polls. That's probably one of the most difficult parts of trying to inspire people to vote this time around. And I want to just make an opportunity just to say, it's like, listen, Doug Ford isn't forever. There is always going to be change. And perhaps this is a good opportunity to look at merit styles. Learn about merit, because this is not about the federal election. This is about the things that matter for us in the province. And hopefully when you see that, you'll see how we can change for the better.
Thank you, Devin.
I just want to say what I see up here tonight is a lot of love for democracy and this community. And I'm very grateful to be a guest of Jeremy and Nolan in your community tonight and on stage. And I'm very grateful that they've both shown up to be a part of this essential part of democracy, which are these debates. I am a campaign manager for a friend in Toronto who is also running. And our Conservative candidate doesn't show up to debates. We don't see that. That's very rare. And to have a Conservative, a minister, a member of Parliament show up to his community and to be able to answer questions as silly or not as they are, or as irrelevant or as
15.
relevant for your community. It's important. And to have the NDP candidate here is very important. And I want to thank both of these gentlemen for putting their names forward, and for running, and for being on stage and showing up with me tonight.
Thank you, Devin. Nolan, do you want to close this out before we go to break?
Well, I don't know about Jeremy, but I'm blushing. Thank you, Devin. I feel like I'm buying him the coffee when we get to Toronto now at this point. But knowing my dad's in the audience, I have to state it, at an early age, I was always asking 1,000 questions of my dad, and one of the things that hit early was, if you don't vote, don't complain. It might have been more colorful, but that is something that has resonated with me significantly prior to politics and in politics. It's, that first time I turned 18, I ran to be able to vote. Some people will fight for the right to vote in other countries, and it's something that unfortunately is being lost on our society right now.
Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to go to our second break. Like our first one, it'll be brief. Please stay with us. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us through that break. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us through that break. Like I said, it was going to be brief. Everyone who's not going to ask a question, please return to your seats. Just a reminder to those asking questions, please be respectful, stick to talking about the issues, and please be brief. Each candidate will be given a 1-minute chance to respond to each question. There will be no rebuttal in this part of the debate. We will go to our first question.
Bonjour, chers candidats. Et voilà. Bonjour, chers candidats. Je m'appelle Jacob Pilon. Je suis l'élève conseiller pour le conseil scolaire du district catholique de l'Est ontarien. Et j'ai le grand plaisir de ce soir représenter nos élèves et d'ailleurs les élèves de l'école secondaire catholique La Citadelle, qui fait justement face à des défis au niveau de son infrastructure. Cet édifice, datant d'environ 1950, a été hérité de l'école anglophone de Cornwall de l'époque. La Citadelle a besoin d'une nouvelle construction pour répondre aux besoins éducatifs de ses élèves francophones. La population étudiante est en pleine croissance et les familles qui font le choix de l'éducation francophone et catholique ont un fort désir de protéger leur langue et leur culture. Pourtant, ce projet de construction peine à obtenir le financement nécessaire. En tant qu'élève conseiller et premier ministre de la Citadelle, je reconnais qu'il est essentiel de bâtir cette nouvelle école, cette nouvelle forteresse, afin d'assurer la pérennité de l'éducation de langue française dans nos comtés. Si vous êtes élu, comment vous engagez-vous à soutenir les élèves francophones à faire de l'éducation en français une véritable priorité et à garantir que les projets de construction d'écoles, comme la Citadelle, bénéficient d'un appui concret et de délais avancés?
Thank you very much. We started with Jeremy. For that last question, we'll be starting with Devin.
Mon français, c'est pas plus bon, je comprends plus que je peux parler, so excuse the English. Certainly, the French language and the way that immersion has been done in this province has been problematic. I understand you're speaking about funding for the new school. Certainly, I would support and advocate for provincial funding for that, and working towards a more Quebecois-focused or inclusive French program in Ontario. I will point out that the PC government has cut funding to our elementary and high school students by $1,500 per student, which outsizedly impacts rural and northern communities in a way that is unfair to our rural partners and our rural municipalities.
Thank you. Nolan?
Well, Devin did a job to me. I'll just say, they closed almost 700 schools in their time, but ultimately, Jacob, I should have known you were going to be asking the question. So Jacob used to work for me way back in the day, and Jacob will probably take my job one day. Recognizing that there are some stakeholders from the school board that are here as well. We've had some meetings also on that one, and we are investing billions of dollars annually into new schools, and it is a process. Unfortunately, it does sometimes take some time and some back and forth to be able to get that process approved. I think a perfect example would be the new high school in Cornwall. It was supposed to be close to 2nd Street and Brookdale, and unfortunately, that wasn't a great location for the Ministry of Education, so we're still going some back and forth on that one as well. But 100% support the French education. With my previous role as Minister of College and
15
Universities,
seconds.
we actually doubled the amount of French education spots at University of Francophone of Ontario. So we understand that there is a shortage of French-speaking teachers. There's 3,500 in the next 10 years, and we're investing heavily to ensure that we have...
Thank you. Jeremy?
Merci, Jacob, pour la question, parce que nous savons toujours qu'il faut investir dans nos écoles. Et puis, le plan pour l'instant, pour l'NDP, c'était pour l'investir, pour juste faire les réparations. C'était comme un plan de 103 000 millions de dollars pour l'investir, juste pour accommoder et réparer les écoles qui sont déjà en place. Et c'est peut-être un peu frustrant pour les personnes dans les systèmes français, qu'il y a déjà l'école secondaire qui est en train d'être faite à la coin Marlowe. Et puis, c'est la question de l'Est qui sépare le plan pour investir dans notre droit français. Mais nous savons aussi que vraiment, dès que nous avons besoin d'investir dans
15 seconds.
les édifices, que c'est notre enseignants qui sont la priorité. Dans ce temps, quand nous avons les enseignants en place, nous parlons après ça vers un plan pour le futur avec les nouveaux édifices.
Thank you. Our next question.
Good evening. Juliette Labossière, Executive Director of the United Way that services Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry, Cornwall, and Akwesasne. Charities like ours supported more than 1/4 of the population last year alone, and many of these people more than once in a year. Charities keep food on tables, get people into mental health services they need, help when bills get out of control because of family crisis. In our region, food banks alone saw a 40% increase year over year in the last year. Considering the financial hardships being faced by the charity sector, what will your party do to bolster, secure, and grow these essential services that are caring for a large portion of your constituents?
Nolan, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Julia, for the work you do with the United Way. Obviously, I'm a bit biased. I was part of the United Way for a few years. We fully respect and appreciate the work that our charities do. You're a crucial component to not only Ontario, but all of Canada. And, they do say if volunteers were paid, it would be in the billions and billions of dollars. So we're extremely appreciative of everything that you're doing. I guess, a proponent of that is, the volunteer hours that are required at our school level to ensure that we get students to understand the value of giving back to their community. That's a very important portion to ensure that the charities are going to be able to stand on their own going into the future, because I do recognize as well there's a significant shortage of volunteers with a lot of our charities, people willing to give their time as well.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Well, hi, Juliet. And yes, we need to support the United Way. We do recognize, of course, how much the United Way does here for the homeless, for people in crisis, that they are a huge part of the system that helps people with mental health, addiction, and trying to get off, and trying to get into a better way of living. And that the United Way lost municipal funding at a crucial time when they were trying to plan for the future. The NDP plan, which I spoke to tonight, when we said uploading the burden, probably sounded like weird words, but what we're trying to say, to be plain as day, is that we see that need, and the province will come and join the conversation so that it's not just a burden on municipalities, so that we can support the people who are doing the work on the ground and make sure that they're taken care of.
Thank you. And Devin?
I understand. I've been there on the ground. I managed a food bank for over 3 years. During COVID, we saw our neighbors going hungry. A neighbor of mine stepped up, founded a food bank. We went from feeding 40 people out a window to servicing 400 clients in 3 hours, right? It was just insane, the growth we saw. Absolutely, this, food security and our future is extremely important. When I look forward in time, I see 90% of Ontario's fresh fruit and vegetables coming from California in the winter. How is that sustainable? With Trump
15 seconds.
and tariffs coming, we need to support our agricultural workers. We need to look to other examples in Ontario, like around Leamington, to bring local produce back to our communities, to have this food security and this resiliency here in Cornwall.
Thank you. Our next question, please.
I'm a little short. Okay. Good evening. My name is Michelle Allgaier. I am the Executive Director of Community Live in Stormont County here in Cornwall. Our agency provides services to adults with developmental disabilities. I am hoping that all three of you are well aware of the campaign that's been running in Ontario with over 150 agencies in the developmental service sector, supporting the campaign called Waiting to Belong. Right now, there's 52,000 people on a waiting list in Ontario alone waiting for services. Some of them have been on this waiting list for over 2 decades. My question to your parties tonight is, what do you plan on doing and helping us address that? Just for information sharing, these agencies that have been trying to run for 50, 60, 75 years have not received any base funding increase, sorry if I'm taking long, base increase in the last maybe 17 years. Last year, finally, we received a 3%, thank you to the government. That was added to all our base budgets, but that did not help us cover the expenses of over 40% increase in inflation over those last years. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeremy.
So Michelle, thank you for your question. It is important to make sure that we're supporting adults with developmental disabilities to be able to live their best life in our communities. And it's time to contribute. We were talking tonight about the cutbacks that were of K to 12 in education, which is basically just restoring support services for people with disabilities, including autism and any other challenges that are going to exist after they're 18 and are able to get into their lives. And it is just by charities and people doing the best to pull up by their bootstraps alone that these people are supported. They don't deserve to be ignored by our society, and I believe that the NDP government will invest in making sure that they get the support they need.
Thank you, Jeremy. Devin.
That's why our government would double ODSP. We're going to double supportive housing. I personally, I have 4 godchildren that are autistic, and the amount of the cuts have been absolutely devastating to those families. And we need to reverse these absolutely punishing removals of support from our friends and neighbors and families, because the more we support them, the less we need to support them later. The more we help early on, the more skills we help give them. The earlier we catch these things, the earlier we help, the less and less they are reliant on us later, and the more that they can be a part of society and be a productive member and to live a dignified life.
Thank you, Devin. Nolan?
Thank you, Nick. I just think I need to get off topic a little bit and clarify. You know, they've commented multiple times on cuts to education. We've actually grown the education budget by 30% since 2018. Last year alone went up by $884 million. It's now gone up by almost $10 billion since we've taken office, so there hasn't been cuts. When it comes to the autism program, we went from $300 million to $600 million, and now we're at $720 million. We added another 20% last year. When it comes to community living, I do recognize there was the 5 to Survive campaign that was going on. I recognize that we also gave an increase last year, but there is more to be done. So I will continue advocating with my caucus colleagues to ensure that organizations like Community Living and the great work that they are doing continues.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. Sarah Good here, Councillor for the City of Cornwall. I didn't plan to ask a question tonight, but when I heard MPP Quinn mention the heart hubs, I felt compelled to come up and ask here. Now, some of you may know about the homelessness, addictions, recovery treatment hubs that were announced. We have an estimate of over 80,000 people in Ontario experiencing homelessness, and that crisis is growing. 27, a mere 27 heart hubs were approved across Ontario. And in our community, we had a dozen nonprofit supportive organizations come together and work hard to develop a plan which included in-kind service and pulling together pieces from so many different places to make something work for our community. We also happened to have a building, which was a requirement of that application. Now, sad to say, we were not successful in that application. And so my question is directly to Mr. Quinn, but I would love to hear the responses from the other candidates as well. What did you do specifically to advocate for supports for our region? And how do you plan to do that in the future? And my question to the other candidates is, what will you do with this new model of heart hubs? Will you continue this, or will you have a plan for something else? Thank you.
Okay, and I believe we were going to Devin first on this one.
I'm not going to pretend like I have a plan, nor do I think, does our platform touch on it. But the removal of these safe injection sites and the concentration of these services is not to the benefit of communities. And again, to be able, if you remove these safe injection sites, whether you agree with the use or not, does not mean it stops happening. And if there are no safe places to do that, then people are gonna do it in public, in bus shelters, in parks. Again, these problems don't go away because you don't like them or you make them illegal. And this government is not doing enough to look after the people who are falling through the cracks in this society.
Thank you, Devin. Nolan.
Thank you, sir, for the question, and thank you for the work that the City of Cornwall did do. Very commendable. When it comes to heart hubs, yes, I have been advocating for heart hubs. There is one just down the highway from us with Smith Falls and Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston. I will continue advocating for them. I would like to believe that this is the first round of many, recognizing that this is the recovery and treatment that people with addictions and mental health need. So I'm going to continue advocating to the Minister of Health to passionately advocate for this region. I did meet with some city officials as well when the application was opened and suggested a partnership, because I also see somebody from the Seaway Valley Health Center here, and hi Aaron. They gave a great application into some of our family health teams, and they partnered up with multiple organizations. So that was some of the suggestions 15. I gave for our region, but I'll continue advocating.
Jeremy.
Well, thank you for the question, Sarah. And I think that the NDP, in terms of its plan, is not going to be looking to how the Conservative government has currently tried to handle this crisis, since we are going to be talking about a new way forward, something more progressive. When we talk about the Homes Ontario plan, it's a bit more broad, because I believe that it allows the nonprofits and the people doing the work on the ground to lead the conversation and get the support that they need. Nonprofits have been working so hard, and municipalities have been working so hard to fill the gap, and the NDP will show more respect to the initiatives that they are doing. And this is a healthcare conversation. When we're trying to close a shortfall, when we are trying to assist in the need, it's the shortage, the lack, the cuts to healthcare that have put us into this situation, and it is the NDP's plan to turn that around and make things better.
Thank you very much. I wish we could get to all the questions. We have time for one more question. Sir, please be brief.
My name is Warren Brownlee, and I have no claim to fame. Going back to healthcare, Jane Philpott, are you all familiar with that name? Okay, have any of you read her book?
I have not, no.
No? Because the Conservatives hired her to do that, right?
With the periwinkle model, I believe it is, that she has?
Well, it's health hubs, right? It's what Aurelia, are you familiar with what Aurelia has just done? Where they've created a health hub, where they look after all the administration and put it there, and then you hire the medicine, all the doctors and everyone else to work in the health hub. So I'm just wondering, where do you feel about that? Like, is that, you talked about hiring doctors and whatever, but that's not the problem, according to Jane Philpott. It's how you treat them and all the administration that they have to go through. So
thank you.
That's my, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll go to Nolan first.
So I'm very passionate about the health hubs, and again, not to call out Seaway Valley Health Center, but the work they're doing there is great. We have a lot of retiring doctors that used to take on a bigger patient load in the thousands of patients, and some of the newer doctors coming in want a bit of a better work-life balance. So having these health hubs, having it that you have multiple professionals under one roof is the most efficient way of doing healthcare, because it's all about the patient and the patient first. So I'm a huge advocate of what we're doing at health hubs.
Thank you very much, Nolan. Jeremy?
So Warren, thank you for coming tonight. You're very clearly an important part of this conversation. This election has gone so fast at this point now that where we would normally see a lot of platforming, more dialogue about what we would do, it's missing from some of our plans when we're going forward. So when you're asking me, have I had the chance to read her book, it's like, gosh, I don't even have time for TikTok anymore. Yeah, exactly. It's not really good for you. It might be shortening my attention span. But we are going to be committed to making things better. And when people from our community are able to bring these issues to us and understand it, know that the NDP is here for the dialogue, that we want to make that plan, and that people like you, when you come to us, you take a new politician and you upskill them in the real speed, because I was delivering mail a few weeks ago. When I hear from people in my community that are able to show me the way forward, I'm able to match that with the NDP. When I go back from back east and I go to Queen's Park, these are the things I can do to help.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Devin, you'll finish us off, and then we'll go to our final break.
With the storm, you picked a good month to take off. I think we've seen the Wynne government try with the local health integration networks. We've seen the Conservative government try. There's a lot of really lukewarm attempts at addressing the healthcare administration in this province over the last 20 or 30 years. I don't think anybody's stepped up and done something about it and had a good look. The Jane Philpott report in her book is a good start. And certainly I would agree that taking a look at the system and saying, are we organizing it the best is a good start. And I'm a fan of breaking things and saying, is this right?
50.
So I would be in favor of looking at what Aurelia does and say, does that fit Cornwall? Does that fit, London? Does that fit other places, right? We need this province has experimented and has innovated in the past, and I would support that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone who came up to ask an audience question. We wish we could get to them all, but we have some time constraints. We'll be going to our final brief break of about 60 seconds. When we come back, we'll be hearing the closing remarks of our candidates. Please stay with us. Thank you. All right, and we're back. Thank you for staying with us through that brief break. We're almost done, folks. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. We're going to go to closing remarks now. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to give their closing remarks, and they'll be presented in reverse order from the opening remarks, which means that we are starting with Mr. Nolan Quinn.
Thank you, Nick. As I stated in my opening statement, it has been an honor of a life to be able to represent this beautiful community that I'm born and raised in. So, born and raised in Cornwall, but my family does live in St. Andrews currently. And, you know, going from being on some boards of directors, the United Way being the most passionate board I was on for the impact it does for the community, but being involved with Big Brothers Big Sisters, the local hospital foundation, as well as Children's Treatment Center. I have to mention the Children's Treatment Center because Angelo Towndale, one of my great mentors, and I was able to pass a bill. Only 2% of private members' bills get passed, and I was able to pass Aaron's Law in Ontario, the first province in Canada that's passed Aaron's Law, and it's in 38 of 50 states right now. So that's something that I was very proud to be able to pass. So thank you. As an MPP, I'm not only passionate for our region, and there's so much great work going on in our region. We're on the cusp of some significant growth, but I'm also very passionate about mental health, children's mental health, with my wife being an educator herself. I recognize how they're all connected. And that's where when I hear of cuts on the education system or cuts to the autism program, I have to push back on those because they are not factually correct. You know, we're doing lots of great things, and I hope to have your support in this next election to continue doing the great work for our region and for all of Ontario. Thank you.
And Devin.
As a centrist, I'm very comfortable in the middle. This has been great. In the opening and closing remarks, I'm bookended by two very passionate people from your community. And I'm here because Doug Ford didn't get it done. He's had 7 years. He said he was going to reduce costs. He said he was going to end hallway healthcare, and it's worse than ever. The government is spending more money than ever. It is having bigger budgets than ever, and you can say you haven't raised taxes, but we've all experienced inflation. We've all felt that. Everything's more expensive, and life isn't getting better. How are they spending so much money, so much, and we're not seeing an improvement? I'm here to advocate for your pocketbook. We're the only party talking about reducing your taxes, reducing your load, right? The time when the Conservative Party was the party of fiscal management is long gone. We are not seeing responsible fiscal government from Doug Ford. Nolan might sit here and say, I've brought this much into the community, I've done this, I've done that. But how can that matter when Doug Ford wastes billions and billions of dollars? And that's a hard number to think about. That $1 billion is about $150 out of your pocketbook. 25% of people don't pay taxes because they don't make enough money. Another 25% of people don't pay taxes because we don't really force them to, or really hard. So $1 billion, if you average that out over 14 million people, is about $70. You double that because half the people aren't paying taxes at any given year. Every $1 billion is Doug Ford taking $150 in cash and lighting it on fire in front of you. But it's almost worse because he's giving it to Americans and he's giving it to developers who already have millions of dollars.
Thank you very much. And Jeremy.
All right, so I think one of the hardest things for me as I've become a new politician is I actually have a hard time talking about myself, but I really feel like I need to take a moment to tell you about why I am here. I'm a father of 3. I live in the education system. My children are going through the education system we use right now. I see what we need. My parents, when I was growing up, my mom was a nurse, my dad was a paramedic. I know what we need for healthcare, and I believe that it's time for change. I want you to bring change to Eastern Ontario, and I believe that I can do that for you. I want to inspire people to use their voice and vote. And I want you to take an opportunity now to look to the Ontario side and look at Merritt Stiles and realize what kind of a premier she can be. It's not that far off. We're talking about going from opposition to leadership. With the amount of people who are eligible to vote in this riding, if everybody used the opportunity to have their voice and have their say, you would see real change here. And I am here to help you bring it. Remember, this is not just an election, this is a referendum. This is a conversation about whether or not you could be bought with a $200 check. I think we can do better. I believe in merit styles. I believe in the NDP. So if you choose change, we can make it better together.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you to all of the candidates who are here. It takes a lot of guts to put yourself out in their community, up on stage like this, taking the time, taking the effort to run in your community, and it's part of what makes our democracy work. So thank you to all of our candidates who came here tonight. I'd also like to thank the Cornwall and Area Chamber of Commerce and the Social Development Council of STGCA for holding this event this evening. I want to thank YourTV and all of its great volunteers who made this production possible. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, the Cornwall and Area Real Estate Board and the Ontario Real Estate Association. And finally, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, being engaged civic individuals, and I hope everyone here goes out to vote. Election day is February 27th. Early voting starts tomorrow through to Saturday. Check elections.on.ca for information about where to vote, when to vote, and how to register. Thank you all for coming tonight.